beautiful pictures. However, as a photographer, I know that both natural and artificial sources of light give equally beautiful results. But your key understanding, your fundamentals of light should begin from understanding natural light, which is why we've put shooting with natural light as our first topic for the webinar. We will go further. We will keep on exploring more complicated issues, more complexities of light, of photography. But let's keep this as our basic and try and understand what I have to tell you today. So, natural light, also called ambient light, is an abundant source of light. It is the light which is present around us, and it is not the light that we are creating artificially. A source of light could be sun, it can be a star, it can be the moon. Moonlight is amazing on full moon nights. If you guys have noticed, the sky is beautifully lit. Starlight is amazing when you go to altitudes that have very little noise pollution, very little sound pollution, and it really enables us to take beautiful astro pictures. These are the three very important sources of light which we notice around us. However, apart from this, we have light refracted or reflected back to the earth through the atmosphere before the sun rises or after the sun sets, which is the nighttime. Even though there's going to be like a clear sky, maybe no stars, it's a clear night, you will still have light. So, light is there, it's present 24 hours. Light is also created in our room. We have a lamp, we have a tube light, we have a bulb, we have light is everywhere. It's just up to you to figure out how you want to use it. Because ultimately, the fundamentals of light remain consistent. They are not going to change no matter where we go, no matter what we plan to photograph. So, your understanding of this is what will help you set your images apart from the rest. So, today I would like to run you through the essentials of reading light. Please be free to ask me questions. Any questions that you want to ask me, you can either raise a hand right now, and if I can take it up at the time, I shall. If not, I'll take up all the questions at the end of the session. Okay, so finally, let's begin. The essentials of reading light. The first one that we're going to be talking about is direction of light. The second one, color of light. The third one, time of day. The fourth one, combining natural light with flash. The fifth one is light shaping accessories. I assure you this is going to be a very interesting session. So please focus, have your attention here because I would really like to see how you create and use this, how you create pictures and use this knowledge that you've gained today. And I would really like to know what your takeaways were in the feedback. So the first thing is direction of light. I want you to see the diagram on the right first. I'll explain it and then I'll read what I've written on the slide. So whenever we are taking a picture, we have the camera, which is in the bottom. I think you can see my cursor. It's pointing on the camera. So we have the camera. Right in front of the camera, in the center, in the shape of an eye, is the subject. Whatever you want to shoot. It can be a person, it can be an object, it can be a landscape. Essentially, your entire subject is the eye, is the symbol in the center of the diagram. So you have the camera, you have the subject, and you have different angles of light. So when we begin, front light, as it suggests, it's very simple. It's the light that comes from the front of the subject. So direction of light is basically the direction from which the light is coming into your frame in relation to the subject and camera. So when the light comes right next to the camera and faces the subject, that is front light. When the light enters the frame from the sides at a 90-degree angle between the camera and the subject, let me just draw that out for you in a triangle. So 90-degree left or 90-degree right, either ways it is side light. The third kind of light, and I'm telling you, I don't have a favorite here, but I have really enjoyed creating images with all these directions of light, and I will show you the examples. The third kind of light is 45-degree light, which you can have from the left, from the right, or 135 left or 135 right. Now, it might be a little confusing, but what is happening here is there is a 360-degree circle. That is how, if you move, it's going to form a 360-degree circle. So if you start from the left side, if you go clockwise, like so, if you start from the top and go here clockwise, then you have a 135 right, okay, which is here. If you start from the other side, you have a 135 left. So depending on how you want to calculate your angle, you have both options, left and right. Similarly, 45 left and 45 right. Then you have top light, you have bottom light, and top and bottom light are not easily explained through the diagram because this is a single dimensional diagram, but if we had a 3D image, I would be able to explain it better. So top light is a light that would fall from the top of the subject, and similarly, bottom light would go from the bottom of the subject. Then you have backlight, which is something which all of us have definitely experienced before. Backlight is something that you don't really term as backlight, but you've seen it every day. It's a silhouette. It is what forms a silhouette. So backlight is what comes from behind the subject at 180 degrees. Now I'm going to discuss each one of them. Play, have close attention, and let's start. So front light. This is a type of light which is mostly used to give a flat or even effect. And okay, I'll explain the diagram first. So in the diagram, remember that this is the light. Okay. Initially in the other one, these are the lights, but now I'm going to take one at a time. So this little light is what is showing the light. And we are focusing only on natural light. So assume that this is the sun or your window or wherever your light is entering from, whatever your source of light is, it being a natural source of light. So this essentially is your natural source of light. And considering that natural light and the sunlight is there most hours of the day, and we most of us plan to shoot in the sunlight, so I've sort of formed a customized situation. Is that front light would usually occur right after sunrise or before sunset. The key here to capturing a subject with front light is that the angle of the sun has to be parallel to the subject, and that can only happen when the sun is very close to the horizon. So ideally, right after sunrise or just before the sun is going to set is when you have front light. A very important thing to understand at this point is that when we're talking about natural light, you cannot change the source of the light. If you're shooting with sunlight, the sun is going to stay where it is. But you can manipulate your directions of light by changing the direction of the subject. So if I'm shooting a portrait and I want that person to have a front light, I can simply ask them to face the sun. Similarly, if I want to change the direction of the light of the person, I can also ask them to move sideways, which will actually give me a side light. So what usually happens in shooting with front light is it gives a very flat effect, a very even effect. It creates very less shadows. And whenever you have less shadows, there's going to be very little depth in the image. So when you have light, you have a shadow, and mostly it's shadows that make the image very interesting. So if you want to take a picture of a person and you don't want to emphasize on the face's texture, the texture of the skin, or maybe if they have some marks, ideally you should go for a front light, which is why it is used widely for beauty shots. Side light. This is something that I really enjoy shooting in because of the type of photography that I do. So either we have food, you have product, you have advertisement. You can use side light in many, many ways and forms, and I will show you examples. So this is where I'm using side light to enhance the glossiness of the cherries here, right? And what is happening is the light source is on the left, as I explained, 90-degree angle, and the light source is coming in from the left, which is why these highlights are created on each of the cherries. And since the light source is coming from one single direction, there's hardly any light on the right side of the image, which is why it is very dramatic and it's very ideal to show the texture and to enhance the depth of the image that we have. Naturally, when you want to create an image with the sun being your source of light and you want it to be a side light, you can totally do it at the time when the angle of the sun is parallel to the subject, but at an angle of 90 degrees. If you want to shoot a front light, you can just make the subject face the sun. It's because you can only move the subject and not the source. It's ideal to understand the difference between front and side light, although the timing is the same. The third one is a 45-degree light, either to the left or the right, as I explained before, and a 135-degree light, which is on the right in my example, but you can have it either on the left or the right. So 45-degree lighting is a very, very commonly used direction of light when it comes to portraiture. And by that, I don't mean that any other directions of light are not good for portraiture. Anything that you decide to do, as long as you do justice to the subject, is good. If you want to shoot a subject with front light and you feel that it is justified, it is a good image. Similarly, if you want to use a side light for a portrait, it's good. There is no issue. If you want to create a dramatic effect, you should go for a side light for a portrait. It totally depends on how you want to click your subject. So although these are examples, they are very singular examples, but I really want you to keep an open mind and understand that you can use these directions of light however you like. So 45 degree left, this light. I have not mentioned the time because ideally the way to explain this is shortly after sunrise, but when the sun is slightly higher. It is probably at an angle of 45 from the ground below. So 40 between 0 and 90, you have a 45, and you can know that it's exactly 45 when there's a little loop forming near the nose of the subject. It's a very beautiful angle. It enhances the texture. It gives a lot of depth to portraits. Ideally, you should try this out. It's very similar to Rembrandt lighting, so give it a go. The next one that I've used is a 135-degree light. This is something which is ideally mostly used to create a highlight on the subject. So if you see images which have rim light or which where there's light falling, like hair light or shoulder light in portraiture, that is when we use a 135 angle of light. In my image, I've used it in a food shot. So ideally, your directions of light can be used however you want. The one thing that I really loved about this is the angle of the shadow that it is forming. It is enhancing the shape of the glass. It's giving me a very beautiful dramatic effect to the image. The next we have is top light and bottom light. These are two very tricky directions of light. So top light ideally occurs at around noon. And from most of your fellow photographers, people don't really like to shoot at the hours of noon. However, you can totally overcome the issues, which is going to be a very nasty shadow forming under the eyes of your subject if you're shooting a portrait. And correspondingly, if you're shooting an object like maybe a product, then the fall of light is not going to be flattering because it's a top light. So what you can do is you can use a little fill light, which is another source of light, which I will be talking about later. And you can totally shoot at noon. You can take portraits at noon. It just totally depends on the kind of effect you want to give, the mood you want to convey. So top light can be used in a very dramatic way. It can have a very positive effect. At the same time, it can have a very mysterious effect. The image that I've put here on the left, it has very little ambient light. So where there's very little light, the major source of light in the image is that little white window light thing, that little opening in the roof of the tea shop. And that is what is giving a beautiful rim light here along the shoulder and the hair of the subject. So I've kept it very mysterious and I've captured it at a very slow shutter to give a dramatic effect if you can see the feet of the subject. Okay, coming to bottom light. Bottom light is something which is rarely seen in nature because, if your source of light is the sun, it can never actually reach you when it's at the bottom of the earth. So, ideally, this is something which is rarely seen in nature, but this is something which is widely explored using artificial lights. If you've seen any horror movie, you've seen their posters, and the most important use of bottom light is to create a horror or a very dramatic horror negative effect. So bottom light is used, although it's not found commonly in nature. It's another direction of light. Backlight is something which I'm very sure all of you have seen. You know that it is called backlight because it is a beautiful source of light, a very beautiful direction. You can explore it in many ways. I have given you two examples here. So although most of us assume that the light is going to come from the basically at a 180-degree angle to the camera. So behind the subject is the source of the light. So it's only going to be useful to create a silhouette. But it totally depends on what type of light is present around you. So in the image on top, even though the light is backlit, see, you can see it from the shadows. It's at a little higher angle than the horizon. And in the bottom, this is immediately before sunset. And in the image on top, it is just after sunrise. So even though it's backlight, it can give such beautiful effects. It's very ideal to light, say, things like fog, clouds, mist, and smoke. That is the only way you can enhance the texture by using backlight. If you want to capture fog, mist, clouds, and smoke properly. That is one thing. You have another use of backlight, which is to create a silhouette, which I think is a beautiful form of expression. It's very useful for opaque subjects. If your subject is, say, transparent, it will let light pass through it. So it's ideal to use opaque subjects for silhouettes. Have a beautiful depth of field in your image and expose only for the background. If you expose for the subject while trying to capture a silhouette, it will not be a silhouette because your camera will allow more light to fall on the subject's face. So there we have direction of light. I will go back on the slides once more so that you can just see them once again before we move on to color of light. So this is front light, this is side light. And I forgot to mention side light can be from the left or the right, depending on how you position your source of light or subject. Then you have 45-degree left and right. Similarly, you have 135-degree left and right. Then you have top light and you have bottom light. Then this is backlight. Now we're going to step into the second most essential component of reading light. It is the color of light. I'm going to be very clear here. This is not talking about the color temperature that you set in your camera. This is talking about the color that the light has. The light itself in nature has different colors. You have blue light, you have a golden light, which is very warm and soft. You have midday sun, which is essentially white, and you have cloudy or wraparound light. So this is not your color temperature, but this is an understanding of how light occurs in nature and how it can take different colors. So the first one is blue light. This usually occurs at blue hour. I think all of us know about blue hour. It can happen before sunrise and after sunset. The most important part of having blue light is that the sun shouldn't be there. So it's either before sunrise or after sunset. You guys can totally download these apps that are there that can tell you at what time you're going to have golden light, what time you're going to have blue hour. So that will really keep you, prepared to take that next beautiful picture. Depending on your location, wherever you are, it will tell you an exact timing of what time, what kind of light you will have. So blue light you have before sunrise and after sunset. It has a very sad or a glum, mysterious effect, and it is slightly cold. However, you can use it to have very dramatic images. So say if you have you're in an urban environment and you have a street light which is like yellow or a tungsten, basically like an orange lamp is there, or sodium vapor lamp is there. So you can combine the orange or the yellow of the lamp and you can shoot a portrait even though you have blue hour happening in the background. You can shoot say you can do you can capture light trails at blue hour. That will be very beautiful because you'll have another color and you can have a contrasting color of say red or white or yellow depending on the car or the object that's moving that you're capturing. And ideally, it's good to capture star trails if you have a little blue sky. So if you could keep a track of what kind of a color or how cloudy or how clear your sky is going to be, you can have beautiful images. So the lady on the left is again the image that I showed you before. And this is an example of blue light which is filtering through. So this is an example of light. It's actually not shot at blue hour, but it's shot later, it's shot during the day, and there's a blue tent on top of where the lady is. So the light that is actually falling on her is blue, even though it's supposed to be white. So when you're looking at color of light, keep in mind that if your light is getting filtered through something which has a color of its own, or if there's a cloth, to say there's a shade or shed or whatever, you have a little covering on top wherever you are. So that will impact the color of light that will be captured. So this lady's image has top light. So you can see these little shadows beneath her eyes, but the light is so beautiful that they are less, they are minimal, they are not very drastic. This is top light with a blue color. Next, we have golden light. This is loved by photographers. It's also one of my favorites. And this is an image that I really, really like, and it has been loved by almost everybody that I've shown it to. The reason is I've used a backlight, it's shot at a golden hour, and it has a beautiful dramatic effect with the shadows. So essentially everything I've mentioned so far is coming together in this picture. You can see the clouds, they are being lit beautifully by the backlight. You can see the little shadows, which are so dramatic. They're very long because the sun is close to the horizon and it's golden hour and it's very close to your sunrise. So the light is very steep. The angle is very steep. Remember one thing, that although you can create magic with golden hour, you can have both a very soft light and a very harsh light. So it depends on where you are, what your location is, how the sky is, how the atmosphere is to give you that effect. So this is slightly harsh. This is a semi-hard source of light. And I'm not going to go into a lot of details about the hardness and softness of light. We will be taking it up later. But when you see the shadows, you can understand that the shadows are clear. They are not very, very soft. I can make out that the shadows are of trees. So it's a beautiful setup, and I hope that you guys are able to put in your little knowledge and capture this or something similar to this whenever you are in the environment. The next thing that we have is midday sun. So ideally, for anybody who wants to shoot product, this is a good source of light. And I'm not saying that it is only good to shoot products, but there's a reason why. Because when we shoot products, even if we want to shoot them in natural light, the key to getting a good product photograph is to ensure that the color of the product is neutral, right? Because no client would ever want you to have a product picture where the product is looking blue, yellow, or pink, depends on where you are. So ideally, you should shoot it in the midday sun. Midday sun, the light is going to be very white. And if you set your color temperature right, neutral, say 52 to 5600, depending on your camera, you will have a white light effect. This is best used to capture product because the colors are going to be absolutely accurate and vibrant. And if you want to create a very soft effect and you don't want to shoot in the harsh sun, you can place your products near a window and that will give you a very soft effect. You can use a gobo, which I will be discussing later, which is going to be a light shaping accessory, which will really help you create better and beautiful images. The next thing that we have is wraparound light. So if you see, wraparound light is something which is present very often, but we choose to ignore it. We sort of consider that there is no light, but there is light. There is a sun. The sun is always there as long as we are in daytime. So, in locations on the globe, wherever the sun is visible, the sunlight is reaching you, there's always going to be light. But in this situation, clouds are heavily, they're sort of becoming a barrier between the sun and the subject. So when you have a barrier of clouds, we call it basically being an overcast situation. The light is being very, very diffused. It's being filtered by the clouds. So it's essentially losing its color and it's becoming very dull and a little moody. So this is a sort of light which will enable you to shoot when you don't want to have a very heavy shadow. It's going to give you very less shadows, but you can still place your subject in a beautiful way, in such a way that you still have depth in the image, like I've done in this portrait. It was a very heavy overcast day, but I made sure to place the subject near a door, so there is light falling on her face from the environment, but she's also having a shadow which is created from the side, which is actually the door where she was sitting at. So you can manipulate your subject even if you have a wraparound light and create images which are beautiful. As you can see in this image, you have beautiful use of shadows, midtones, and highlights. So as long as you balance those out and there's depth in the image, you're always good to go. Also, in this other image where we have the boats, when I reached the location, it wasn't as foggy, but soon it started getting very, very foggy. And that is when I understood that this is a beautiful way to shoot, even though we don't have much light falling directly on the subject, but we do have different colors happening in the environment. So when we talk about color of light and direction of light, it's very important that when you plan a shoot, you understand that the two together are what are going to help you shoot something brilliant. If you're planning to shoot exclusive of one, you're probably not going to have very, very amazing images, because a good picture is one that has depth, which has dimension, which has color, which has beautiful source and usage of light. So if you keep all of these things in your mind and keep observing nature and everything that's happening around you, how light is falling on different subjects, you can see backlight happening on trees, on leaves. You can see so many different phenomena coming together only if you keep observing. This is a very, very important and exciting part of the presentation today, which is time of day. It essentially talks about how you can shoot at any given hour. It does not matter when it's 1 in the morning, it's 2 in the morning, and by that I mean 1 in the night, 1 a.m., 2 a.m., 3 a.m. Even at 9 in the morning, you can shoot at 6 or 7 in the night, you can shoot at 11 in the night. You have a time of day reference. You can shoot within 24 hours of a day. So basically, you can shoot at whatever time you want. It just depends on what you want to shoot. So this is a very interesting project. It's called the Time of Day project, the 24-hour project. How it works is you have 1 day of recce. Recce essentially means that you go to the location prior to the shoot. So before you go to shoot. So say for example, if we are shooting, I'm going to pick a very generic example. If you want to shoot, say, Qutub Minar in Delhi, okay, you can pick any location of your choice. Just keep it in your mind when I talk about it. So let's assume that you want to shoot Qutub Minar in Delhi. So a day of recce would essentially mean that you go to Qutub Minar 1 day, so a few days in advance, but you essentially spend one whole day in understanding the location. That is called recce. You will understand the position of the sun. When the sun rises, you want to understand how the sun moves, where the sun sets with respect to your subject. You'll understand how the light changes, when is it flat, when is it dimensional, how is it affecting, how does the subject look at different hours of the day. So that all of that will be covered in your day of recce. Essentially, in this project, you're going to pick only one location because that is going to be so challenging. Because if you have one location and you have to spend 24 hours shooting it, you must totally understand that it's possible. Even though it's one location, it's the only way that you can challenge yourself as a photographer. That you're given an assignment, you're given this one place to shoot, and you have to click so many images out of that in one day. How can you do it? Then you have a very interesting parameter. So a day consists of 24 hours. So we are going to divide it by 4 and have 6 sessions of 4 hours each, which basically means if you're shooting, say, from 12 in the night to the so 12 in the night, if I start at 12 tonight, I'll stop shooting at 12 tomorrow, 12 in the night tomorrow. So a whole 24-hour cycle. So what will happen is during this 24-hour set that I will have 6 sessions. So 12 to 4, 4 in the morning, 4 to 8 a.m., 8 to 12, 12 to 4, 4 to 8, 8 to 12. So that is how my division of day will go. And within each of these sessions, you have to shoot 3 images. This is a good start. If you want, you can reduce it to 2 images. And if you want, you can actually challenge yourself by shooting more than 3 images. I have done this project thrice before, and I've put together some images for your understanding, but these are of different locations, but it's just to give you an idea of how beautiful one day can be when you're standing behind your camera and just capturing what you see. So when we start, and it's going to put together all of your concepts of color of light, direction of light. I'm going to talk about it a little. So on the left, you have um, it's a blue hour situation in Delhi. I shot this during COVID, so you can really go and shoot whenever you want. It doesn't matter. I had this little tree in this park around my house, and how I've done this image, how I put it together is by capturing different exposures and then stitching it together in Photoshop. Then you have an image I captured in Munnar. This was a sunrise at a very beautiful location. I think it's called the Kolokumalai Peak. So while I was traveling, I shot this. The next is Pushkar. I already had this image on the presentation, but I've kept it here because this is golden hour, and you have such beautiful use of light. The side light, the long shadows are so dramatic. The dust that is sort of gathering, going up from the ground is also being lit by the light. It's stunning. Then you have this picture during midday sun. So it essentially covers all your time of day. You have the blue hour, you have the sunrise, you have a golden hour, then you have midday sun. This is around sunset, the picture in the center. And this was a beautiful sunset that I witnessed. The sky had multiple hues, blue, magenta, yellow. Beautiful silhouette, one of my favorite locations. And then at night, I've done an astro shot. So essentially, all 24 hours of your day you can shoot if you want to. I would really be happy if a lot of you can try and do the 24-hour project. It'll be really, really good to see what you come up with. So now, before we start with the next topic, I would like to ask Amit ji to come in and talk about the Samyang lenses.
Thank you, Garima. This is Ashish. Actually, due to some unfortunate circumstances, Amit ji is not able to present. And on his behalf, I'll be presenting some introducing Samyang basically. So
Sure,
I'll
sure.
take this time.
Please go ahead, sir.
Thank you. Is this screen visible?
Yes, sir, I can see.
All right, so you can see Samyang is a Korea-based company. It was founded in 1972, and Samyang has made it possible to bring this workshop to you. And we have planned a series of 12 workshops, which will be doing at least one workshop a month in the future. So here you can see Samyang is also sold under the brand Rockinon in some countries, and they have extremely sharp prime lenses, and there are some autofocus lenses and some manual focus lenses. This is the list of autofocus lenses. They have for Canon DSLRs 14 mm f2.8, 85 mm f1.4. For Canon mirrorless cameras, they have 14 mm f2.8, 85 mm f1.4. For Sony mirrorless cameras, they have a huge range of lenses: 14 mm, 18 mm, 24 mm, 35 mm, 1.4, 35 mm, 2.8, 45 mm, 75 mm, 50 mm, 85 mm f1.4. For Nikon DSLRs, they have 14 mm f2.8, 85 mm f1.4. These are all autofocus lenses. Besides this, they also have a range of premium manual focus lenses. Here are the premium manual focus lenses. You can see most. This is called XP, Expert Prime lenses. So this is their premium build quality, ultra sharp manual focus lenses. There's 10 mm f3.5 is the world's widest prime lens. This is rectilinear, which means it's not fisheye. It will try to keep edges vertical and horizontal lines intact. And there's XP35mm f1.2, 50mm f1.2, XP14mm f2.4, which is available both Canon and Nikon mount, XP85mm f1.2. All the other ones, as you can see, are available only for Canon mount. This is autofocus tiny series. The list that I presented in the first slide contain these lenses, but why this is of special importance is because these are very small prime lenses, which anybody who uses their DSLR mirrorless camera on a gimbal can appreciate the size, the small size and weight of these lenses. So this 85 mm f1.4. This is a very small f1.4 lens, and you can imagine how beautiful videos you can create with this lens. So this is all, and I know while registering, some of you have expressed your desire to buy some of these lenses. We have special offer, but we will not be giving that away on the during the webinar. But you can write that on the feedback forms, and our representatives will approach you. So that will be all from Samyang. And Garima, you can take it over from here and continue the workshop. Thank you all for joining. And we will, at the end, we'll have 15 minutes Q&A session. So there I'll be providing some references for further reading and some videos to watch. Over to you, Garima. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. That was really informative. And guys, I have tried the Samyang lenses. They're really good. The build quality is great. They're very, very sharp. I will talk about them very soon. So let's go back to the presentation. I hope you guys are really enjoying this so far. And if you have any feedback, please drop it. Please also turn off all of you turn off your mics so that I can proceed. Thank you. So the next topic is combining natural light with flash. This is something that I was very, very scared of trying till I learned how to do it. And believe me, it is a beautiful thing to do. Once you know how to balance your flash with your ambient or natural light, you will absolutely love the results. Because the key to capturing a good photograph is to always have good light. And we are often faced with situations when the ambient light is low, or say when the sun is set and there's very little light present in the atmosphere, and you cannot adequately expose for the subject. So it's always better to have a handy flash with you. I would like all of you to read up on how to use a flash and explore it for yourself, figure out which flash works for you best. They're essentially, it's just like carrying your own little source of light, carrying your own little sun wherever you go. So this is something which is very, very useful, a very, very immensely important accessory to have. But don't be scared of it. It will only help you. You can use different light shaping accessories that go with artificial light sources, such as the flash. We will discuss this later in another webinar. I will take up a separate section, a complete different session on this, so that you guys know how to use which source of light, how to use which light and which modifier. But right now, I only want you to focus on a little flash that all of you can probably get, and just experiment with it. It's a very low cost solution to having less light, and I guess you will all really enjoy trying it out. So there are two situations, as I mentioned. One is when the ambient light is very low, the sun is already set, or you're in a dark room, but you want to take a picture. That is when the flash will come in handy, or when the subject is backlit, which ideally means that the source of light is behind the subject. So 180
Garima,
degrees
may I
from,
interrupt for a moment?
yeah, yeah, definitely.
You're not presenting. Can you please start sharing your screen, the
Okay.
presentation?
Sure, sure, sure. One second. I'm so sorry.
Sorry.
I'll actually do it. No problem. So sorry. Is it visible now? Yeah, I think it is. One second.
It's visible. Thank you.
I'm so sorry, guys. I will repeat what I just said. So, what I was talking about is combining natural light with flash. This is the fourth essential thing to understanding light. So, a flash is essentially a source of light that you can carry with you. It's like a little sun in a bottle. That's why we call it bottled sun. So a flash can help you overcome difficult situations, such as one where the ambient light is low, you're in a dark room, or the sun is already set, and you cannot light your subject properly. The second option is when you have a subject which is backlit. So ideally, your camera is there, your subject is there, and the source of light is behind the subject at an angle of 180 degrees. So it's basically forming a silhouette. But what if you want to take a beautiful portrait at sunset? So you want the subject's face to show. Ideally, you should carry a flash then. So whoever all of you are, out of all of you, whoever has a flash, let me know if you like to use it or if you face any issues. We can definitely take up that topic next time. And those of you who don't have, don't shy away from trying it. You will really enjoy. The next thing and the last topic for my presentation today is light shaping accessories for natural light. I want you to understand that there are many, many ways you can modify and shape light. But since we are restricting ourselves to natural light today, I will only be talking about accessories that are useful when you go out shooting in natural light. So the first one is a 5-in-1 reflector. You can get it off of Amazon. You have brands like Sonia, there's a newer, there are many, many local brands available. It is not at all costly. It will cost you somewhere around 700 or 800 bucks. You can get a reflector, and trust me, you will be thanking me once you try it because it's a very, very useful thing. The next thing that you have is a gateway sheet or a diffuser. It is a gateway sheet is essentially like a tracing paper, a white sheet through which light can pass. Or a diffuser is going to be very similar in effect with a gateway sheet, but it's essentially a piece of fabric. A diffuser is something which is already made. You can buy it from the market. A gateway sheet is paper. You can carry it with you. You can fold it and put it in your bag. It will be very easy to carry. The next thing that you have is the thermocol or a white paper. And this is also very useful. I will explain the difference amongst all of these very soon. Then you have a black painted thermocol or a paper. And the next thing that you have is a gobo. Now, how you can use this is the 5-in-1 reflector is something which essentially has all of these in it. So point number one, the 5-in-1 reflector has a diffuser. It has a like a thermocol, like a bounce surface, a surface to bounce your light off of, and it has a cutter, which is your black painted thermocol. So what happens is when you're shooting something, light will behave in different ways. If you have less light, say for example, if I'm shooting the subject on the right, this uncle, this postman who is sitting, and if I encountered a situation when the ambient light was very, very low and I did not even have a flash, I could just simply use a 5-in-1 reflector with the silver side. What the 5-in-1 reflector with the silver side would ideally do is it will reflect, okay, it will reflect the light which is falling on it. So depending on where you want more light, you can just use the reflector in that direction. Remember, in photography, in lighting, your angle of reflection should your angle of incidence has to be equal to angle of reflection. That is how light works. And if you're able to understand where your angles are matching, you will be able to get a good fill light. So a reflector has a silver side, it has a white side, it has a diffuser in it. You can cover the diffuser with the white side, which will essentially become a bounce like a bounce board or something that you will use to bounce light. So there are two different things. Reflector reflects the light, your white thermocol or paper will bounce the light. What is different here is the reflector will reflect most of the light. Say if you have a silver surface, say 95 to 98% light will be reflected back. But when you're using a thermocol or a paper on a cardboard, it will bounce the light. So the intensity of light will be definitely 1 to 1.5 to 2 stops lesser, but it will be bounced back on your subject. The third thing that you have is a black painted thermocol, which is essentially a cutter, which we call in photography. You cut the light, means you restrict the light from falling on a certain area. So a black thermocol or a black paper or anything that is dark, which is opaque, which will not allow light to pass through it, is essentially a very good source to cut the light to reduce the light where you don't need it. I'll also come back to a diffuser. It might get a little confusing, but I want you guys to take a note of this and keep on researching what they are, how they can be used. A diffuser is something which helps you diffuse the light, which means essentially, like for example, if you have the sun and then you have a large window. So what is happening is, and the window has a curtain, a white curtain. So you have the sun, then you have a window, and then you have a curtain. So sun is the first source of light, but when you're shooting, your source of light becomes the window with the curtain on it. So what happens is the curtain, the window and the curtain together are diffusing the light from the sun. So they're acting as a diffuser. That is what happens. This is what I said that, when you want to have soft diffused light, you can place your subject near a window. That is the use of a diffuser. You can diffuse the light, you can make it very soft. So even though we have sun, which is a very harsh source of light, very bright source of light, you can diffuse its light and use a diffuser or a curtain or a window and a curtain or a gateway sheet to diffuse it, to have soft light. The last thing is a gobo, which is something I have come to really love. I'll give you an example of a gobo now. This is going to be a very good tip and trick for you to use. But if you see, this image on the left, the one where there's this little tray and there are these soaps, and then you have a shadow of a leaf happening, right? So essentially, the leaf in this situation is acting like a gobo. A gobo is something which gives shape to the light. So when there's a shadow falling on my set on my frame inside my frame, the leaf is the gobo, and it gives a very beautiful dramatic effect. So you can cut out these gobos. You can use botanicals. You can use cutouts out of paper, put them, stick it on a chart paper, cut beautiful different shapes, and you can change the shape of the light and how it will look in your frame. So gobos can be very different. You can search how to make one. You can figure out on Google what type of a shape you want, and depending on how you want your light, you can create it yourself. So these are the 5 light shaping accessories for natural light. These are very useful, and I hope that you try them and you can see a difference in your pictures. The next thing is an activity that I want you to do, which is known as image deconstruction. This is something which is very beautiful. It is something that is useful for anybody who wants to do photography at even a basic level. When you look at a picture, you deconstruct it. You try to understand how where the light is coming from, what is the direction of the light, what is the color of the light, which is the source of the light, how many light sources are there, how has the photographer imagined and taken a particular shot. What kind of a setting have they used in their camera? What would ideally have been the shutter speed? What is the aperture? How deep is it? What is the depth of the image? All of these things I want all of you to start observing when you look at pictures of other photographers or go back to your own pictures and start deconstructing them. It's a very useful exercise for all of you, and I want you guys to try it and let me know if you had a good understanding of what you were doing before and what you're going to do now. And as I mentioned, I have tried the Samyang lens. I've tried the 85 mm 1.4. I've used it with my Sony. It's a beautiful lens. I've used it at 1.4, which is such a beautiful aperture to shoot at. And I really like how dramatic the light is. I've kept a very neutral image here because I want you guys to understand that your lens is something which enables you to see. But when you start looking at simple things, that is when you go, I'm so sorry about that. I'm so sorry. Okay. When you start looking at simple things and then you take it one step ahead and you keep on learning. So, no matter what it is, you try and shoot with all the lenses that you have, try and experiment with different apertures, with different sharpness, and see how it affects your image. I've shot this at 1.4. I wanted it to have a little blur, and it's an 85 mm. 85 mm is a very ideal focal length to shoot portraits. It gives you a very ideal shape and size of the subject. So if you're shooting a portrait and you want a person's face to look very similar to what it actually is, 85 is a very good focal length to try that. I want you guys to keep that in mind. So this is what I've shot with the Samyang 85 mm. I've had it for a very limited amount of time and I do plan to keep using it. I will share what I've shot in the next webinar. This is a beautiful quote that I wanted to share with you guys. So, in the right light, at the right time, everything is extraordinary. It's by Aaron Rose. I want you guys to check his work. I think he teaches on Flern, but a really beautiful thing to say. He's put it perfectly in the right, and at the right time. Everything is actually extraordinary. So, this is where you can connect with me if you guys want to. Um, that's my email. You can reach out to me, talk to me about whatever you want to ask. If you have any doubts, I am going to start the Q&A now, but if you want, you can note these down and get in touch with me later. I want you guys to also drop in your feedback before I leave the presentation. I think Ashish ji will share a form or a link where you will be able to provide your feedback. We'll tell you about it. And your feedback will be really valuable so that we know what to cover in the next webinar, if there were any gaps or whatever we can improve on so that it becomes even smoother the next time around. Okay, so now I'm going to go back to the meeting and yes, okay. So now we're going to start with the Q&A. I want you guys to start writing in your questions in the chat box. And I'm also showing my screen so that you know exactly what the question is that has been asked. And also Ashishi is right now sharing some beautiful resources for you guys to take a look at. You can go ahead and watch the videos on YouTube. You can also read the books that he's shared. And this is something basic, but it will really help you guys. So we have four resources here. Light illuminates, shadows define. This is a YouTube video. Then you have another YouTube video actually, Following the Light at Nat Geo by Mark Thiessen. Just check it out. I think this will be amazing. Complete Guide to Light and Lighting in Digital Photography. I hope you guys are checking out the chat box on your Google Meet right now so that you know exactly where the resources are being posted. Okay, awesome. So now let's begin with the Q&A. So I'll give you guys a minute or two to start writing in your questions.
Garima, I think Nitesh already asked a question before during
Mm-hmm.
the session. What is the difference
Yeah,
between moonlight and starlight?
right. Absolutely. Hi, Nitesh. I'm glad that you asked me a question here. I think it's a very interesting question because I also had it, and beautiful insight here, really. So, moonlight and starlight. So, essentially, the difference lies between the fact that the moon is actually a Satellite, right? It's not a star. So moon is not a star. It does not have light of its own. It reflects the light of the sun that falls on it, right? And star is something which has a light of its own. So that's why, we say the star is twinkling. So the basic difference between the two is that stars have light of their own, they emit light of their own, and the moon reflects the light of the sun that falls on it. So when we see the moon and it's lit, it's essentially the light of the sun falling on the moon, which is reflected to us on the earth. I hope that clarifies your question. Awesome. Thank you, Nitesh. So the next question is asked by Hitesh. Hi, Hitesh. How are you doing? Are you here? Okay, awesome. I'm glad to hear that. So Hitesh has asked me that 85 fixed would be the same as using 85 in a 70 to 200 2.8. So I'm actually trying to figure out what you mean here because 85 fixed is a prime lens. And okay, so you're asking me about the focal length, right? Okay, I'll tell you. So the difference here is essentially the fact that 85 fixed is a prime and 70 to 200 and 70 to 200 is a variable focal length. So these two things are what makes it so different. A prime lens is one which has lesser elements. So each lens is a lens which is made up of optical elements. So different optical elements are inside the lens, which makes it come together. So an 85 a prime lens is one with fewer elements, and a lens like a 70 to 200, which has a variable focal length, has more number of elements inside it, which essentially means that the quality and the sharpness of the two are different. So 85 prime will have better quality and sharpness than using a 70 to 200, even if it's 2.8, at the same focal length of 85. I think this is exactly what you asked me. So there will be slight difference. The 85 will be better. Okay. I just got your question. You're saying the reason to ask this was in the last topic you picked up about saying 85 is best for portraits. Okay. So what I was talking about is something else, but I'll clarify both the things. So essentially, an 85 prime will have better quality than using a 70 to 200 at 85 focal length, right? But as we are progressing, as technology is getting better and better, I think the 70 to 285 will also be very, very good. It's up to you to figure out the results. Ideally, a prime lens will always be slightly better. So Hitesh has actually asked me this because I said that the 85 is best for portraits. So what I actually meant was that if you want a person's face to show in its right dimension and size and contour, 85 as a focal length is best to do that. So I meant that as a quality of the lens, that at that focal length, a portrait is captured beautifully. Amazing. So the next question, okay, I hope Hitesh is happy with the answer. Do let me know if you have further doubts.
Garima,
So
may I add something?
yeah, please, please.
Hitesh, also the difference is 85 prime, you can get 1.4, 1.8. 1.8 85 is quite cheap, both in Nikon and Canon. So the difference in bokeh, the background that you will get from 70 to 285 and from a prime 85 1.4 or 1.8 will be quite different. So the overall look of the picture will be quite different from both the lenses, provided at what aperture you're shooting at. Thank you.
Right. Thank you so much, sir, for adding that. He's absolutely right. We have a very big difference in the aperture values here. So I think you guys should try it out and figure out what you like better. Okay, so Ketan has asked me, how did you manage to get that golden hour picture that you have shown in the presentation with deep focus? Ketan, could you please tell me exactly which image you're talking about? Is it the green one or is it the one with the camels? If you're around, please let me know. I'll be able to answer your question better. The landscape. Okay, so you're talking about the green one, right? I hope my presentation is visible. I'll go back and show you the picture.
It's visible.
Golden light. Okay, thank you, sir. So this picture. Okay. So you've asked me how I managed to capture the depth in this, right? And um, the depth and what is the next part? Which lens I have used here? Okay. So I have used a 70 to 200 here. The reason is the 70 to 200 is a lens which provides beautiful compression when we are shooting something which has a lot of layers. Okay. And I remember shooting this at 200 mm. So what is happening here is, although there are a lot of things happening in the frame, they are all compressed beautifully and they're coming together in the image, right? So here at the depth, I remember the aperture being somewhere around f9. If I'm wrong, I'll actually check the details and tell you. But how you focus precisely is your plane of focus and your plane of sensor have to be parallel. And I think for me, when I was shooting this, it was at infinity. So my focus ring probably showed an infinite value. So when everything was at infinity with respect to my camera, it was completely in focus within the same shot. So that is how I managed to get the depth. First of all, the lens played a huge role because it's provided for a beautiful compression. So all the elements are coming together in one frame and they are giving a lot of layers. So 70 to 200, beautiful depth. I think f9. You don't always need to go f16. If you know how to focus properly, you can get a similar image even at f9, f10. It depends on also how sharp your lenses are at those apertures. Okay, awesome. So the next question is by Dave Roy. He said, "Ma'am, thank you. Okay, thank you. Welcome. How to keep a balance between the ambient and virtual lights while shooting? I often end up with too much exposure from the flashlight in my portraits and overpowering the ambient light." Okay, so what Dave is asking is a little technical question. I want that whenever you guys start shooting with your flash, you might also have a similar doubt. So what happens when you're shooting with a flash is there are two things. Your flash when you shoot the flash, it depends. Also, one more thing. Are you shooting it on camera or are you shooting it off camera? Because if you're shooting it on camera and you are firing the flash, then I think the distance is playing a major role and it is overexposing your subject. You need to soften the light of the flash. So say, for example, I'll go back to the image here in this uncle's image, okay? I've used a little fill flash here, very soft. So what's happening is that the light within my ambience is very low. So I've used my flash. It was actually an off-camera flash. So when I've used it, I've essentially given the light matching the window light which was happening behind me, right? So there's a big window, big source of light, and I've kept the flash in a very similar angle so that it's looking as if it's coming from the same place. So, you don't have a distinct uh, difference. There's no difference between the flash and the natural light happening here. So first of all, where you're keeping your flash, the angle of the light. The next thing is the distance of the flash, and the third thing is the intensity of the flash. If combining all of these three also you feel that your light is overpowering the subject, then I will suggest you to use something to diffuse the flash even further, like a little I think you have these modifiers. You have a little bounce accessory. You can bounce the light. You can soften it further. There are diffusers. There are things to bounce the light of the flash, so you can explore those and figure it out. Awesome. So I hope that clarifies your question. Okay, thank you. So the next question is by Devashish. He's asked me what is the best lens for product photography. Okay. So Devashish, I have tried all my lenses for product photography, including a wide 16-35. What totally matters here while shooting a product is how you want to portray it. So I'll start with a wide angle lens for product. If you want to show a product with a lot of environment and you want to make sure that the product looks bigger than life, then you can use a wide lens which will provide a distortion and make the product look bigger than it is. It's a very customized situation. If you want that effect, you should go with a wide lens. If you want the product to look Similar to what it is, I think a 50 is one lens which provides very little distortion. It will keep it true to how it is. Macro lenses or 90 or whatever macro lens you guys have, depending on the manufacturer of your camera, which lens you're using. A macro lens is something which will enhance the texture and it will show you a lot more detail about the product. So a macro lens can be used when you want to have very, very minute details enhanced. And some people also prefer to shoot products with 70 to 200. So ideally, where I'm going is basically there's no best lens to shoot products. It depends on what you want to do with it. It depends on how you want to show the product. It totally depends on you, and you have to experiment and figure out which focal length is suiting your situation the most. I hope that helps. Do let me know if you have any other questions. A step toward life. I'm so sorry I forgot your name. I think it was Sushant. I'm so sorry. If I'm wrong, I'm so sorry. I think you've asked the 85 lens effect will also depend on whether we are using full frame cropped sensor camera, right? Okay. So, right, you have a very valid question here. If you're using a full frame, the image will be the area covered in the image will be slightly more than the area covered in uh, with area covered in a camera which is a crop sensor, but with the same 85 lens, because your total area covered will be different because the sensor is smaller in a crop sensor, right? So that is the only difference that will happen. Raman has asked, okay, I hope that I've answered your question and you're happy with the answer. Do let me know if you still have any doubts. Raman has asked me how you got the background jet black in the image of cherries. Which lens was used? Okay. So, Raman, I have put a black cloth behind the cherries. That is exactly how the background is so dark because it is black and I have used cutters on the side. I've used a black cloth on the left to avoid any light going behind. So, firstly, the background itself is black. Also, I have cut the light with the help of a cutter. It was a black paper that I used. And I don't exactly remember, but I when I see the picture, I'm very sure that I shot it with a macro lens. I hope that answered your question. So Nishant is asked, while shooting portraits in the street, how to get that proper exposure on the eyes so that it doesn't hurt the person's eye and the details and eye color are easily visible, apart from golden hour when the light is harsh. Okay. Also, being a street photographer, can't manage the light modulators, so need to play with the available light only. Absolutely, Nishant. I agree with you on that. But this is by using light shaping accessories, you will actually take your photography up a notch. So even though it seems like a hassle right now, but if you start giving it a shot and slowly build up on it, you will enjoy using them. And as you asked, proper exposure on the eye so that it doesn't hurt the person's eye. So are you saying that if you're using a flash or the natural light is harsh, it doesn't hurt the person's eye? Um, I really need to understand that is this a question? Okay, so natural light, right? So if it's too harsh, ideally you should position your subject in a way, first of all, that it does not hurt them. It does not cause any discomfort to the subject, right? So that is point number one that I can think of because I don't think that it is a photography issue. It's more about the position of the person, the subject with respect to the light. And in order to get the details in eye color, what you can do is use a little reflector or a little bounce board. That is how most of us get catch light in our images when we are shooting portraits in natural light. I'll hold a certain white or a silver reflector or a white paper to give that catch light. It's the same thing. It will reflect light back into the subject's eyes. So that is the only way because if your subject is angled in such a way or the light is angled in such a way that it's not reaching their eyes, you can only reflect it back. So essentially, you should try out the accessories that I mentioned. I think that will really help you out. So Raman has asked, which flashlight should you recommend for multi-purpose and one-time investment? I think it's a very subjective question. It depends on first of all your budget, and it depends on the manufacturer that you want to go with. I can do one thing. If you guys have a more specific requirement, we can come up with a list of good manufacturers and then correspondingly what they offer, and we can discuss it in another webinar. I'm so sorry I can't go into more details, but I will definitely remember this and we'll try and incorporate it very soon. So Nishant has asked also, ma'am, in this frame portrait of uncle under ambient light, how do you manage the ISO and the grain? Okay. So I remember that portrait was shot at f1.4 with an 85 mm. I always keep my ISO the lowest. My camera goes at a 50 and I ensure that I never cross 100. And there was enough light actually in this situation that I did not have to pump up the ISO. So there was no grain. So ideally, when you shoot, be mindful that your ISO should be as low as possible to avoid grains. And if your camera has that tolerance to has more tolerance towards grains, then you can pump it up if you really need to. But ideally, keep it around 100. Um, you have a Fuji crop sensor. I'm really sorry, Nishant. I don't know how a Fuji crop sensor would perform under different light, but I'm very sure that given your ambient light, if you try and experiment, different time of day and depending on where you are, I think you can try and figure out how to work around this problem. So more and more you practice, it'll get easier for you to shoot in low light, balancing everything together. Devanshu has asked how to improve our understanding about lights. So are you asking about natural light or artificial light? Okay, Devanshu, if you could reply, I will then answer your question. Otherwise, um, I think the best way out, anyway, if you're shooting natural light or artificial light, whatever you want to know, natural light, right? So if you want to keep shooting with natural light, I'll try my best to cover up more issues, more topics in the next webinars. But otherwise, as I told you, observe the light, try to understand the qualities of light, and keep practicing with what you have. If you take your camera and tell yourself, okay, I'll give you a little exercise, that will really help you. Take an apple, go to your terrace or wherever you want to shoot. Just go to a certain spot where you can keep the apple the entire day. Just keep it from the morning, say before sunrise to after sunset. Okay, and keep shooting that apple at an interval of 1 hour. So when you have those images together, so 24 pictures, say 12, if you're shooting in a 12-hour window, you have 12 pictures. Then you compare those 12 pictures. Use a tripod. Don't move your camera. Don't move your focal. Don't change your focal length. Don't change the position of the apple. Keep changing the light little by little to balance the exposure so that you can see the effect of the light itself. Everything else will be constant. You'll definitely have to change your settings to expose properly for the apple, but you'll understand how the light is changing. And through that one single subject, you'll have a very clear idea of how light affects and how natural light can be used and how it can be understood further. Okay, so Kanika has asked when is the next session? I think Ashish ji answered it. We are working on it and most likely in the last week of January 2021. Tarun has asked which Sony camera do you have? I have a A7R4. Honestly, doesn't matter as long as you know how to use your camera, you know how to use everything it offers, all the features, you know which lens to use, what to do, you know about lights. It'll be beautiful. Um, Nishant has said that Aman sir has suggested to do the same exercise. Awesome. Raman has said sab sukh jayega. It's okay. Even if it dries, you can use something else then, guys. I mean, I really enjoyed the joke, but I'm talking about the exercise. You can use something else, whichever can withstand the weather and the environment. So yeah. Any other questions?
It's already 8:49. I think we can close. We'll take
Awesome.
one last question and then we can close.
Sure. So whoever wants to have the last question, please go ahead. I'll take one more question now. Thank you so much, Hitesh. I'm so glad that you enjoyed it. Tarun has said you can use the egg. I'm sure you can. But egg is going to be white, so try and use something which is dark, which has a contrast. Don't use an egg. Okay, last question. Dave has asked how to remove shadows while shooting portraits in direct sunlight under the eyes or the nose. Okay. So, Dave, as I mentioned, this situation can arise when you're shooting closer to noon because the sun is going to be on top and the shadow will come directly under the eyes or under the nose. This is the only situation where that angle of shadow will form. So you can use a flash to balance it out. You can use a softer source of light. You can take the subject into a place where the light is softer so that the shadow is not so harsh. As I've used in that picture with that lady, I've used a top light, but it's in an environment where the light is soft and the shadows are not so harsh. Thank you so much, guys. Ashish ji has just shared the feedback form. Please go ahead and fill it. Let me know if you enjoyed it. And thank you so much, sir, for having me. I've really enjoyed doing this for you guys. And yeah,
Thank you so much, Garima, for such a informative session, and I'm sure all our participants enjoyed it. And we'll look forward to have you again for our next session. And thank you all the participants. You've been a wonderful audience, a participative audience. We hope we'll have more participants in the next webinar. And please feel free to share about this series of webinars with your friends and anybody who you know is interested in photography. Thank you very much. See you soon again.